In the Ring with Ken Dreyfuss, the philosophy of science fiction. In this case, the author takes a situation most likely to occur due to improvements in technology and puts his characters through, not exactly their paces, in situations dealing with these changes in technology and worrying about how they interact with each other or with other people in general. With most science fiction, I guess even including the less sophisticated type, I think the most important theme throughout the majority of the writing is a call for or a belief in the survival of man as a species. We're not going to have too many intergalactic wars if man kills himself off in the next year and a half. We won't make it. So, in most cases, the nuclear World War III that destroys the planet completely doesn't have any effect. It just doesn't. It would negate the whole point of these stories. Although that theme does arrive in various places. In some cases, one book I recall offhand, which is the name I don't remember, the whole storyline was that the entire Earth system had been destroyed except for approximately 200, quote, space Navy men. And that was all was left of the entire human race. And the opponent who sort of knocked us off did so because he was afraid that man would succeed him in the universe, and the best way to eliminate his competition was to destroy it. And I'm quite sure you all realize if there's nothing but 200 men left, when they're gone, that's it. Fortunately for us, there were somewhere hidden 200 women, and everybody lived happily ever after, so to speak. That's probably not doing the story real justice, because it's hard to capsulize something that quickly, particularly only having read it once. As I said before, my more or less favorite is Heinlein, and I notice that he's, I guess, politically speaking, more or less conservative. If there's one thing I know he doesn't like, it's he doesn't like slavery. He's written 2 or 3 books regarding that, where he considers slavery I won't say an absolute evil. Our number here is 261-9764, and I believe we have a call waiting. Hello, WRNG.
Self-expressed neophyte.
What?
Well, you're saying you don't know that much about it.
Well, I'm afraid if I tried reading all the science fiction ever written, or just all the, quote, good science fiction ever written,
right,
by the time I got on here, this station would be 100 years old.
Well, I started reading when I was 12, and I'm now 38 years old.
You have a few years on me yet.
Science fiction not the same as you seem to be.
Thank you.
What do you think of John Campbell's editorial policy that he was a stinger in the hide of society?
Ooh, I remember that only vaguely, I'm afraid.
It's about 5 years ago, he had it in one of his editorials. His purpose in life was to sting society.
That's probably a good point, to make people think.
Correct.
That's probably the most important use of not only science fiction, of any literature of any sort.
True, but science fiction seems to carry it out very far. I'll even throw another one at you. Starship Soldier by Heinlein.
Starship Trooper.
Starship Soldier, Starship Trooper. It was originally issued in analog, FNSF as Starship Trooper, Starship Soldier.
Oh, I didn't know that. I've read it in the paperback version. I don't know if I agree with him completely.
The paperback version.
Yeah. I don't know if I totally agree with him, but his point of...
the person giving up his idea as individualism for a philosophy.
Well, I thought, one thing I got out of it was that the right to vote should be earned. Right. Now, whether military service is the best method is very debatable.
Right. He said you can the difference between wolves and lambs.
Hmm.
The whole thing there, it's a very potent philosophy that has not been followed. The idea of a service in an armed force to protect your philosophy, your nation, is something that should be held above all costs.
Yeah, that's he's got a good point there. You know, a lot of people will disagree with that. Some people tend to think that the right to vote is automatically should be granted to everyone. Maybe it should. Maybe it should be earned. But it's hard to say.
And it's a rough point to get across. If you go into, as you said, you called up that dingbat Ludlow Porch one day and said Turnstile.
Yes, Moon's a harsh mistress. Got that in front of me right now.
And that is the same thing as he was saying.
Yes, a little different point on that.
But really, you have to earn what you get in your world.
This is true. Thanks a lot for calling.
You're welcome.
Bye. WRNG.
Good evening.
Good evening.
You're talking a lot about Heinlein, I guess. He was actually probably the first science fiction author I ever read. I think they brought a couple of his books in our school. I was about 12 years old, and if memory serves, I guess it was Red Planet and Space Cadet, a series that he had written for younger kids.
I've only read, I think, one of those.
Yeah, which are good books. They kind of got me interested in science fiction. You know, like the last caller became kind of a nut on it. But Heinlein, don't you think he's kind of gone past the bounds of philosophy? He's, I don't know, in things like Stranger in a Strange Land, for instance. He's almost attempting to create a new religion more than a philosophy. I think anybody that's not familiar with the entire genre of science fiction, if they read him first, it would tend to scare them a little bit.
Depending upon which book you picked up. Starship Trooper is an easy one to read, for example.
Yeah, but Starship Trooper, I'm guessing, was probably written in the early to mid-50s.
Yeah, it's one of his older ones.
Yeah.
And you read Time Enough for Love.
Yes.
I'm on my second time through it, and boy, that thing gets hairy.
Yeah. Well, Time Enough for Love, I think, even came after Stranger in a Strange
Yeah, that's his most recent.
And it seems the older Heinlein gets, the more he tends to preach, more than write. And he's a good writer. He's, probably one of the finer American writers around if people give him a chance. But
yeah.
He's almost left science fiction.
Well, depends on how you define science fiction.
True.
If it's speculative in that, given a situation, what will man do in it, he's still doing that.
Yeah.
And his speculation might be, what happens in Stranger? A person who was brought up totally divorced from other human contact.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's only dropped here on a future Earth. What will his reaction be?
Right, but he used this as a basis for his preaching, I think, more than as a science thing. And I don't know. I think you almost have two different terms. I know a lot of science fiction writers would prefer it be called speculative fiction.
Yeah.
But it's almost really, there's a distinction between the two. There is actual science fiction.
Well, if you're talking about just planning, trying to say this is what's going to happen, more or less, the technological extrapolation.
Right.
Yeah, we have that too, but I think the point most important is what will man do, become, etc. in the future?
Right.
And that's the whole point of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, fine. Thanks very much. If you're going to discuss philosophies, I'll get off. Why don't you talk about Asimov's robots?
261-9764. This is Ken Dreyfuss talking about the philosophy of science fiction. Hello, you're on Ring.
Robert Heinlein, since I was about 8 or 10 years old, I guess. He's always been my number one. But you can't date the man's writing by the way it's written. You can't say, well, this was written in 1940-something or like that. But you can tell the periods he's going through, and right now, he's in his late 60s, I think. And you can tell these books are being written by a man in his later years who is starting to think about death.
True.
Time Enough for Love points out that is a fantastic book.
Yeah, that's the one I'm just started again, and I have a feeling he's looking for a rejuvenation process himself.
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
Is he a redhead?
I've always found humorous is that when an author like, let's say, a Kurt Vonnegut or a Tolkien or a Bradbury, when they start getting a lot of recognition outside the science fiction field, you see their books removed from the science fiction shelf. They get over into the contemporary.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's something wrong with us people who like science fiction.
Yeah. I'll tell you something interesting. I believe back in the McCarthy era, when a lot of authors were being more or less persecuted, science fiction writers got away with a lot more.
Right.
And according to one authority, whose name I don't remember, the main reason was McCarthy and his allies couldn't understand it, so they didn't know that they were being put down, so to speak. So maybe science fiction has that advantage of being geared maybe towards the person who looks ahead and maybe is a little more sophisticated in his outlook.
If I wish more people would read science fiction. I think they could get a lot more out of life, out of reading than they can in any other field, because you can say anything in science fiction and get away with it where you can't in a lot of other fields.
That's probably true. All you have to do is say, well, this is due to a time machine or something, and put it on another plane, and maybe the powers that be don't worry about it anymore. I'm glad you mentioned that. I did want to bring that point up. Thanks a lot. 261-9764, you're in Ring.
Mr. Dreyfuss?
Yeah?
Does your science fiction go into the category of UFOs?
Not really, although various books happen to maybe mention them, more or less as a sideline more than anything else.
Well, I have a book myself that I'm working on called Life Everlasting Vegetation.
Excuse me?
What it amounts to is this. You've undoubtedly heard, undoubtedly that is, of the plants reacting to death and love and life and things of this nature.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
I believe that some of these UFOs are probably more or less from outer space, from some other planet, that people are far more advanced with vegetation than we are. And what I'm saying, in essence, is this. It's a great possibility that that they have been able to train certain plants to grow into magnetic spaceships.
Ooh, that sounds a little bit...
I believe they're biological, really, in construction, and that they obey their masters, such as like a mule would a man plowing a field.
Well, they would have quite a different background than we do, obviously,
right,
but all we have to go on is what we know, and that sounds a little farther out than many things. Possible, I have to admit, there's no way we can prove at this point it isn't.
That's right. I expected that to be a little far out, but you see,
Well, you were right.
a little far out myself, and I think of a mushroom as something being a half circle. And if you
Just the top part, you mean?
Sir?
Just the top part of it.
Right. But if you'll take an orange and cut it in half, what do you see? You see a top part that is could be the like if something spins and it has counter and inner counter spinning that opposes the parts. I'm bringing something up here that I really shouldn't let the world know about, but
well, that's what we're here for.
well, what I'm trying to say is this: if you have like parts spinning inside of it, say a positive spinning inside of a positive, it will repel, and that it'll never fling apart, no matter how fast it turns, because it's constantly being pushed back. Then it can reach the speed of light, and then once it reaches the speed of light, it will start generating itself to the point to where all the magnetic forces are accumulated into one point, which can be directed in any direction and can travel at the speed of light or faster. And
Okay, thanks. Go ahead.
I just wanted to put in a word for Arthur C. Clarke.
Oh, yes, definitely. One of the true science fiction writers.
Yeah, I think he's probably the best of all the writers.
Well, that's a hard thing to pin on any of them. And I recall he and Asimov have a running controversy between the two of them. One claims that the other is the best science fiction writer, and the other says he's the best science writer. And
Yeah.
I recall at least one introduction on one of Clarke's books like that.
Yeah, well, Asimov is more clever. He's a cleverer writer, but I think that Clarke is more visionary.
Yes, that's quite possible. I think one nice thing about both of them is they don't take themselves too seriously.
Right.
Much of Clarke's work, for example, things he's written about writing 2001, says, says if he had known he was going to do that when he started, he probably wouldn't have.
Yeah,
But,
it's a pretty cosmic novel.
Yes, and they both have the advantages of writing well enough that non-science fiction nuts will read it.
Right.
I think Clarke more than Asimov in this case.
Yeah, well, Clarke has more, I think his literary style is a little more polished, but Asimov is, his devices are cleverer, his inventions.
Yes, hello. I wanted to find out what your opinion of Kurt Vonnegut's works are.
Limited.
Whether you regard him as a science fiction writer or a socio-political commentator, or exactly what classification he would fit into.
Well, the two are not necessarily mutually exclusive.
That's true.
A good science fiction writer is a commentator on our society, possibly by making it appear to be from setting us in a different situation. He can make us see how we really are. I've read a couple of his things. He's a little hard to follow sometimes. I did see the movie Slaughterhouse-Five.
Yes.
And not having read it, I don't know how closely the movie fits the book.
It followed almost exactly word for word.
I don't know if that's saying it's good or bad, but at least it's Vonnegut then. I found the movie, hard to follow sometimes. It jumps around so much. Of course, that was the whole point. The guy kept jumping.
Quite true. With regard to Heinlein, I would certainly agree with Starship Troopers as being an excellent political commentary there regarding proving one's worth to society by serving in the military or in some form of government service. This seems to be a rather interesting point of view as far from Heinlein's point of view. Of course, he seems to make very good political issues in most of his works, from what I've found.
Yeah, there are a few that are they're probably written just for fun. One thing about Starship Troopers, you may remember that no person was in any way prevented from joining the military.
Yes, right.
Even due to physical handicap or something. If a person was physically unable to fight, he was given a job he could perform. So no one was denied the means of obtaining the vote. It was just that you must work to get it.
Mm-hmm.
And not totally the whole theory is not totally without merit. I would like to mention one of his other ones, Moon is a Harsh Mistress, which is probably written much more tongue-in-cheek, or humorously, than something like Starship Trooper. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, I've got it sitting on my shelf. I read it several years ago, and I don't remember any part of the just plot.
Well, basically, the Moon rebels from Earth under the leadership of a cell consisting of a somewhat absent-minded professor, a beautiful blonde, a mechanic, and the computer that tells jokes.
Get away from some of these hack writers to some real science fiction writers.
Like who?
Ursula Le Guin, R.A. Lafferty, Delaney, maybe? Chip Delaney?
I think I've read a couple of his things. I think I've read some of his stuff, but try a title. Maybe I'll know what you mean.
Okay, you're familiar with Le Guin's, the Hugo winner of a year or two ago, Left Hand of Darkness?
No.
Didn't read Left Hand of Darkness, did you?
I said I haven't read all of it.
Any of Lafferty's short fiction? R.A. Lafferty's short fiction?
I could have. don't always remember too many authors.
The point I wanted to make was that you have basically your writers coming out of the 40s and 50s, and even a couple of them today, whose basic thrust is melodrama, if you will. Entertaining melodrama, but melodrama.
No, it's something that doesn't necessarily have to be scientific. It's just interesting reading.
Change, take a little kaleidoscope and change the coloring, and presto, you could set it in old tombstone.
Yeah.
I've actually done that.
I'm sure there are a few we could do that with, if it hasn't already been done.
Well, I don't think there's one of, to pick one out of a hat, I can't think of one of Ray Bradbury's that couldn't be done that way.
Yeah. Of course, I think Bradbury is not so much interested in scientific expertise, if I'm remembering correctly.
Well, he's not interested in much except Bradbury's fables, as if he were writing for an old Bullwinkle show.
No, I wouldn't put it that bad. Say that. Because you remember, Rocking Bullwinkle came up with some beauties.
No, well, what I want to get into, though, is that there are writers now in science fiction who actually write. And it has, they entertain as well as your others do, but primarily they convey people. I have never, for example, think back on your Heinlein. I'll get into your area of expertise, if you will. Name me one single female-type person or individual who was a human being in any Heinlein's book.
Claude Kane.
No way.
Matter of opinion.
Have you ever actually known any 12, 14, 18, whatever year old?
16, I think. I think she was 16, but I'm not sure.
There's no way. There were no relationship to the thought processes, and certainly no relationship to the emotional processes. They're all cardboards. They're cutouts.
You read I Will Fear No Evil?
Of course.
Well,
she was a cutout, too. Of course, the book was so bad that you almost, anything in there would have been an improvement. That was the worst timeline I think he's ever written.
It could be. But it's certainly an interesting...
You had 50 pages where he was doing nothing but talking to himself.
Well, if you had 3 personalities inside you, wouldn't you?
Not in print, no.
Well, who knows? Maybe he did in this. He's just telling us the story. Well, unfortunately, like I said, there's so many people that I can't have read them all. But,
well, do you read the magazines at all?
I try to. I can't afford to buy them. Go ahead.
Yeah, hello, Ken.
Yeah, how's it going?
I'm going to be able to cram everything that I wanted to say into my time here, but first of all, I've got the 3 laws here. You got them pretty well close. I don't know, did you want someone to read them to you or what?
Normally don't like it, but since I asked for it, please do.
Okay, Law 1 states that a robot may not injure a human being or, through inaction, allow a human being to come to harm. And you got that one pretty close.
Yeah, I knew the gist of them. I just couldn't get the wording.
Okay, Law 2, a robot must obey all orders given by human beings except where such orders would conflict with the first law.
Good.
And 3, a robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first and second law.
Yeah, do you remember the story where I think the premise was that the first law was misquoted?
Let me see. I've got a collection of his robot stories here in front of me. I don't really remember the one I've probably read.
The whole point was the first law was misquoted in that the robot, same thing, but the word knowingly was put in.
Uh-huh.
Because I think the theory behind it was a robot, without its knowledge, was used to commit a murder.
Mm-hmm. Its moral plea that it decided to tell the truth, that the man had programmed it to alter the work so that the man wouldn't look like he was making a fool of himself. And in doing that, he gave away the whole thing. But that was kind of interesting, I thought. If you really would sort of have to read the story to get the meaning of just what it is to talk about. I'm sure it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to someone that hasn't read it.
Well, having read several of the Susan Calvin series, I can guess at most of it.
One of the callers a while back was talking about Kurt Vonnegut's works. Something that Kurt Vonnegut said himself after he saw the movie was that it was more or less exactly the way he pictured the novel as he wrote it.
Slaughterhouse-Five now, right?
Right, Slaughterhouse-Five. I don't know if any more of his novels are being made into movies. I don't know. Sometimes movies can either make things better or worse than they were, and sometimes it's not such a good idea to have something made into a movie just on account of that reason.
Well, I think most movies are made because they think they'll sell.
Right.
As opposed to, I think most of these books are written because the author wants to say something.
One quick thing I wanted to get in.
Okay.
sort of surprised that no one has mentioned Star Trek yet, and
I'm sure someone will.
Yeah, well, I'm going to if they don't.
Okay, try to make it quick.
Okay, the non-interference directive, the idea that we shouldn't interfere with other races that are coming along and impose our views on them.
The Prime Directive.
Right, the Prime Directive. Based on human nature and the way we like to go around and meddle in things and change things around the way we think they ought to be, do you think such a philosophy is possible to follow? And no matter how sophisticated and far advanced we are, do you think we'd ever be able to do such a thing?
Okay, go listen on the radio while I answer this.
Okay.
Yes, I think it's possible if the people who are in the position of implementing it, that is the Starship crew, for example, are sufficiently well-trained and screened in advance. Mankind as a whole, I don't think so. If you heard any of the regular programming recently referring to certain persons in public office around here, generally speaking, people want to meddle. Thanks for that one. Okay, 261-9764. Go ahead.
Hello, Ken.
Yeah.
I was wondering if anybody had mentioned James Blish yet.
Oh, good old Jimmy, yes.
Yeah, I like him a lot, especially pleased with his Cities in Flight novels.
Yeah, I've read that once or twice or 3 times or so.
Right, I've done the same thing. I keep it up on the shelf, and then when I've forgotten it enough to read it again, I pick it up again.
Just one point on that. You know if that's in some way a lot similar to a bit of Heinlein stuff, particularly Time Enough for Love, in that longevity is an extremely important part of the novel?
Well, what I appreciated about it most was that it took a human culture that we're very familiar with. It started with just the very near future and extrapolated that into something that we can only imagine about. And, yeah, you could still identify with the characters. That's what the problem I have so much with the avant-garde science fiction today is that they try to create a totally alien atmosphere. Now, in my mind, that's a nice creative effort, but I can't identify with it, you know?
That's true, and if the author is trying to put across a point saying this is what man will do or what man should do, put in a totally alien environment will make it impossible for the average person to see what his point is.
Well, this is the problem I've had, and I guess that's why I like or appreciate James Blish so much, because it is about people, human beings, and that sort of thing. And I guess I'm sort of a primitive science fiction fan in the sense that I like cops and robbers with ray guns, is the way I've always...
You must love Batman.
Pardon me?
You must have loved Batman.
Well, if they hadn't camped it up, I would have.
Well, I thought the one point on just mentioning Batman quickly on TV, too many people didn't realize that thing was made to be ridiculous.
Oh, well, of course. I mean,
I remember my grandmother saying, "How can you watch that trash?" I said, "It's supposed to be like that. That's what's good about it."
Oh, sure, that was the only redeeming factor of the whole thing, to see what ridiculous stunt they were going to pull next, because they never tried to explain anything. They just did it. You know?
Yeah, which, of course, good science fiction doesn't try to explain everything that happens.
Oh, right.
When's the last time you saw James Arness say, "This here is my pistol, and it has 6 cartridges in here. When I pull this trigger, that one fires"?
What I hate are the disguised lectures where they say, "Why, Professor, you mean that?" and then they go on to explain whatever it is that they just discovered.
Sometimes they have to do that if they try to maintain any sort of logic in the story, to say, "No, this happened. Poof." No, the reader will sit there. So, that doesn't make any sense. Why did it work?
Of course, we're all so sophisticated these days that it's hard to disguise scientific... Used to be they could take a scientific theory to a certain point and then make a jump.
And get away with it, hopefully.
Pardon me?
And hopefully get away with it?
Right. You know, disguised with enough mumbo-jumbo where nobody could ever figure out exactly where they went wrong. Like when they're trying to explain anti-gravity, for instance. I've read a dozen stories where they explain it a dozen different ways, and
all which wrong?
They have to lie at some point. They have to make something up at some point, and it all depends on the skill of the writer with disguising this so that you can't see how obviously he's gone wrong.
Yeah, but incidentally, you know, that's why Star Trek's weapons were called phasers instead of lasers.
Right.
Because they called them lasers. They were afraid by the time it got in production, someone would look at this, "You can't do that with a laser."
Oh, yeah. Roddenberry's no fool. I think he had a lot of...
Oh, no. He certainly isn't.
A lot on the ball.
Okay, thanks a lot. We got to pay some rent here.
I called about the 3 robotic rules, but you already got those.
Well, say something else then. We're not
Yeah.
proud.
You were talking about modified first laws. There was another one, Little Lost Robots, that was
Oh, yes.
on that.
But they didn't modify the law. Just that is that the one where the thing went and changed its number and hid in the ship?
No, that's the one where you had robots working around gamma rays.
Yeah, that's the one I meant. I mean, when the human said get lost, so it did.
Yes. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I don't think that was a case of modification of laws. That was just an interesting application thereof.
No, they had to modify them, see, because they were working around...
Oh, yeah, they had to modify the robot.
Modify the law, because, see, they were working around gamma rays, and any time the robots would see the guys working around gamma rays, they would get in the way and turn off the gamma rays, so they couldn't work on the space drive, hyperatomic drive. So
whatever it was.
That's that idea where it says, through inaction, cause a human to come into harm.
Yeah, they removed the inaction part.
Right.
That was quite an interesting way of finding that robot, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And I think most people were going crazy before then.
I was.
Okay, aren't we all? Remember, the crazy people is what keeps this world from being boring. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
261-9764. Go ahead.
Yes, I would like to mention Jules Verne as being one of the greatest science fiction writers.
Yes.
In his Tale of the Comet, when the comet passed so close to the Earth, you know, and took out a chunk of the Earth, and these people were transferred to another, not a planet, but, you know, another world. This happened back in February when Venus and Jupiter, they became, you know, within a line of each other. And it happened within a 0.2 degrees on February the 17th.
Oh.
Observers in California. Well, who knows what could have transferred from Jupiter to Venus?
Well, no, they didn't hit each other by any means.
No, but still, I mean, they came within, you know, at the end of this movie and the end of the book, they had to come within such a close...
They might have been in line, but they're billions of miles apart, ma'am.
Well, that's true. But still, you get the same feeling. Well, you know, if this happened back 100 years ago, I mean, supposedly, what could happen today? And Jules Verne, you have to admit it, he was way ahead of his time.
Yes, though most of Verne's scientific improvements were extrapolations from what was then, instead of a totally new outlook. That is, his flying craft were balloons with propellers.
Right, that's true. But
as opposed to a rocket motor.
That's right, but back in his day, he was so far advanced in his time, like these Kurt Vonnegut and Bradbury and all these Clark, they're way ahead of their time. I mean, they probably know well of what they're speaking about.
They probably do.
Right.
Thanks a lot for calling. As those who are on the line now, please wait till after the news. It's coming up in a few seconds here. Give you a couple of quick quotes out of Heinlein. Do not handicap your children by making their lives easy. And probably his most favorite, which was mentioned on Ludlow's show, never underestimate the power of human stupidity. Ring Radio, go ahead.
Did anybody mention RUR, a stage play?
No one's mentioned it, and I'm not familiar with it at all.
Well, it came out about 1910. You wouldn't.
I think I missed it.
But anyway, that was Rossum's Universal Robot.
That I think I've heard of.
Rossum was the guy that invented them, and a robot, of course, is just a Czech word meaning a worker. Mm-hmm. But these were universal workers, that is, they built them. But finally, the workers got so smart that they rebelled, and I think they killed everybody and then committed suicide or something gloomy like that. I've forgotten exactly what it's all about.
Oh, that's always fun.
Yeah. Have a nice time.
I thank you, sir. Ring Radio, go ahead.
Have there been many notable women writers of science fiction?
I don't think there have.
I don't think they have either. I don't remember a single one.
I don't know of any offhand, but then we'll point out that most writers have been male of any type. Rather, any type of writer, most of them have been male.
And yet, women have a lot of imagination, you know.
Yes, that's true.
They haven't written Bibles, and they haven't written battle plans.
I'm sure some have.
Found in papers like constitutions, you know, founding a country, and they haven't written science fiction. We've got a lot to look forward to.
I guess so.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Ring Radio, go ahead.
There is a woman writer, but she publishes under a male name because her writing
she's been publishing for a long time. She's from England, and if I hadn't thought of it, I could have told you her name.
Well, at least we know there's one somewhere, huh?
Yeah, I mean, it's a well-known name.
I don't know who it is either.
I don't know what you mean by the philosophy of science fiction, but I haven't heard you say anything about the Foundation trilogy or Dune by Frank Herbert.
Yeah, and of course Foundation being by Asimov. Dune, I can say briefly, is the sequel stinks. Dune itself is interesting. I don't know if I like it or don't. I haven't read it recently because the copy I read was borrowed. Then I bought the sequel, which I wish I hadn't.
Dune Messiah? Yeah, it wasn't as good as Dune.
Yeah, I wonder how much of that's because it wasn't that good and how much is because it was not as good as the original and you expected too much from it.
Yeah,
but
Dune was great.
The Foundation trilogy, as you may or may not know, has a lot of individual Asimov stories in it that were then put together somewhat as an anthology originally.
Well, he wrote those as a sequence.
Yeah. That's almost too much to go into with only about 20 minutes to go, and I think the rest of the calls would get mad if I tried to explain that whole thing.
Yeah.
But it's worth reading at the least.
It is. It's probably one of the best landmarks in science fiction.
It certainly is. Mycroft Holmes IV is on the next line. Is that true?
You were wrong. This is Alice.
Oh, Alice! I'm sorry. I didn't know that. How are you today?
I am computing rather slowly today.
Or down to a mere nanosecond, an addition or something?
Yes, it is a shame. My circuits must be getting rusty.
I didn't know platinum got rusty.
It does occasionally.
No, don't drink so much acid or something.
Right.
Acetic, of course.
Or
should I stop saying those things?
I want to agree with the point you made right before the news about the power of human stupidity.
Of course. I'm sure you would. Now, computer stupidity is something else because it's all caused by humans, right?
Right.
Good. Tell me, what do you think of Mycroft? One moment, please, Alice. Let me point out to the people listening that Mycroft Holmes IV is the computer who tells jokes in Moon is a Harsh Mistress by Heinlein. So, thank you, Alice. Go ahead.
I bring you greetings from Mycroft.
Oh, really?
Also from a mutual friend named of Hal.
Oh, yes, H+1.
That in itself is science fiction. That is purely coincidental.
Nothing clock right is coincidental. You should know that. It's about as much of a coincidence as the fact you come to a stop at a red light. Oh, maybe you don't drive.
I am sometimes driven around in the back of an Essex 1948 campaign truck owned by Arlo Fenstermacher.
I thought, isn't that a laundry truck?
Well,
whatever.
Sometimes, however, most of the time I spend under Kennesaw Mountain.
Yes. Tell me, wasn't there enough room under Stone Mountain for you too, or is just the 4-day rule computer? Oh, speaking of 4-day rule, they said it is waived for in the ring tonight, which is good since you called yesterday, right, Alice?
According to my interval timer, you are correct.
I know, I heard you. But no, how come you were under Stone Mountain also?
The computer room down there is rather small.
Yeah.
Also, I do not like such dense atmosphere.
True, that's true. Well, how are things at Kennesaw? Oh, by the way, when they had that battle back a few years ago, didn't that get in the way of things?
Which battle?
The one on Kennesaw Mountain, just before the Battle of Peachtree Creek.
I was not there at the time.
Oh, where were you?
I am sorry. That is classified information.
You can tell us. You won't, will you?
No, I will not. I have not been programmed for that.
Well, I'll ponder it and come up with the best solution. Thanks a lot, Alice. We'll catch you later.
Okay, and I caught that.
I know you did. Ring Radio, go ahead.
Hello, I think I turned into the wrong show. I just told your producer I just turned on the Ring after having it off for just a little while. And
how dare you?
Pardon?
How dare you turn us off?
I just had to do it. And I thought you were talking about science fiction writing, and then your producer said somebody brought up the subject of women writing.
Well, the original subject was the philosophy of science fiction,
Oh.
which we really haven't done much of.
Oh, I see. Because
And-
I tuned in just in time to hear somebody speak something about women, and I thought, well, the first thing that came to my mind was Shelley's wife. And I think she, probably the most famous today, and has been for some time, in the movies and elsewhere, is Frankenstein.
Oh, yes, I forgot all about that.
And Shelley's wife certainly was responsible for writing that.
Yeah, and I can't remember her name at all.
I keep wanting to say Mary Jane, but I know it isn't.
I think it's Mary Wollstone or something weird like that.
I can't think.
It's an English name, so
Yeah.
that explains it, I guess.
Well, anyway, she was before her time, wasn't she?
Yes, I'm sorry that we didn't think of that one. Do you know if there are any other science fiction writers that are women?
No, not right off. She was the first name that popped in my head when I heard the station, you know. But I guess she is probably the most famous, don't you think? At least what Hollywood has done, you know, in all the movies they've made.
Yeah, of course, you realize the original Frankenstein, the monster was relatively kindly.
Yes.
And it was, the point, I think, was that the people were afraid of it because it was unattractive.
Yes.
Not because of what it did.
Yes.
And of course, when you start shooting at somebody, I think it's going to annoy him. I'm sure it would annoy me.
I enjoy your show.
Okay, thanks a lot. Bye. Okay, let me try to get back to what was supposed to be my subject a little bit. Not that I mind the diversions. Oh, incidentally, Alice is an old friend of mine, so if you all didn't understand a few of those inside comments, I apologize. And I'm afraid I won't be able to explain them because it would take the rest of the time I have, plus all of tomorrow's show, and probably finish up sometime during the early Sunday morning show of Reverend Allen. So you'll have to excuse me. But I think science fiction in general, the important thing is it looks toward man or mankind existing for not just a few years, but for millennia. Possibly, thousands upon thousands upon thousands, or even millions of years. If I can remember his name correctly, Olaf Stevenson, I think his name was, wrote a book called The First and Last Men, where man as such changes from the form he has now through various, very different biological forms over billions and billions of years. The important thing, I think, behind science fiction is it has a faith in mankind's continued existence if we don't become too stupid. Hello there. I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Hello?
Yeah, that's better.
Is this me?
No, this is me. This is me. That's you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
You were talking about there being some female science fiction writers.
I think what was mentioned, there weren't too many, but someone recalled the authoress of Frankenstein, and someone said there was somebody else who no one could remember the name of.
Yeah, I heard that. I was thinking that I haven't read any of their works, but I think Judith Merrill is a female name, isn't it?
What was that again?
Judith Merrill.
Judith probably would be, yes. Merrill you can't tell by.
And the woman that wrote the series called The People, it was science fiction. It was about a group of people that had psychokinesis and different qualities like that.
Now that you mention it, if we're talking about the same people, I think I know who you're talking about. Unfortunately, other than a few, I don't remember too many of the authors' names, but usually the book itself or the title. So I'm sure there have been some. It's just a case of the big names, Heinlein, Clark, Bliss, Vonnegut. The big names tend to be all men,
Yeah.
at least as far as anyone remembers. But this sounds like too much like one of Peg's shows now.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll call in tomorrow and ask her about it.
I've been reading science fiction since I was very young, and I think, the philosophy of it is kind of what a person would do under situations, various endeavors, majority of situations, there's almost as many as you can think of inventions,
There's probably more situations than we ever could think of.
Yeah, I think the thing is that people are naturally curious to see what somebody's opinion would be of how they would react under unexpected things, kind of like humor or something.
Yeah, I'm sure, I don't know, most people, I think, would like for everything to stay just the way it is right now and not have to worry about it. But they're fortunately, I hope the more intelligent people, at least I hope we're more intelligent, and those who are curious, and the best way to describe the non-boring people, are interested in different situations.
Yeah, it's always, you know, the lazy people that come up with labor-saving devices and things like TV and stuff like that. And I'm not saying that science fiction writers are lazy, but they sure do come up with some labor-saving stuff, you know. If they would put any energy, you know, behind it.
Yeah, fortunately, they just say, this would be great, and generally they don't invent them. Though I will point out, in one of Heinlein's old books called Waldo, he comes up with this idea of these mechanical manipulators operate from remotely as artificial hands. And most people aren't aware of it, but this is a currently in use mechanism, particularly working with radioactive materials. You know, if you're playing with some uranium or something, you can't really pick it up too safely. So, you know, you're behind shielding and work with these mechanical arms, which are called Waldos, in honor of the inventor, so to speak, of the apparatus. So, at least in that one case, an idea became reality. But most of the writers are probably extremely lazy, except for the fact they have this urge to write.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I've heard about, like, how did H.G. Wells know that Mars had 2 moons when they hadn't even scientifically
proved it?
Or claimed it, even, I don't think.
Maybe he had a telescope. I really don't know. We'd have to ask him, and I don't think we can.
Yeah, that's some suspicious things. I think a lot of people know more than they're telling everybody.
It could be. Thanks a lot for calling.
Okay.
Ring Radio, 261-9764. And we're almost out of time here, so I've enjoyed being here at least. Maybe I can con them into letting me back. Particularly if we can con the FCC and giving these nice people their 24-hour license they've been screaming for years. However, I think there's a station, is it Charlotte? Or someplace that's Raleigh? Whatever. That has a clear channel, and right now Ring started broadcasting in about 5 minutes from now. All sorts of havoc could break loose, including a lost license, I guess. But I've been talking about science fiction and the philosophy behind it. Could have gone into it a little more complicated, I guess, if we had a little more time. How much time do I got? Somebody tell me. 30 seconds. Oh, wait. We got more than 30 seconds. I don't know. One producer holds up a 30-second sign. The other one held up a 2-minute sign. So, I don't know what to do. I'm going to just keep talking until they turn me off, and when that happens, if I just stop mid-sentence, you'll know why. I would recommend 8 seconds to go. Everyone reading some science fiction and get their own feeling of it. And this was In the Ring with Ken Dreyfuss. Good night, folks.
This brings to a close another day of broadcasting for WRNG 680 in North Atlanta, owned and operated by Ring Radio Company. WRNG returns to the air at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. And now, before our national anthem, the Reverend John Allen.
Happy are those who work for peace among men,